need to be making at least $80,000 to $100,000 if you want to be considered middle class in some parts of California. Democrat presidential candidate Robert Kennedy Jr. says the middle class is being wiped out.
More than anything, we have to rebuild the American middle class. And part of that is getting away from the warfare economy. The strength of a nation comes from a strong economy and a vibrant middle class. And we have wiped out the middle class in this country systematically.
Brandon Arnold is the executive vice president for the National Taxpayers Union. He joins me now. Brandon, thanks for getting up with us this morning. You know, he's Kennedy Jr. He's a very serious contender against President Biden for the Democratic ticket. So when he says something like this, I think it really makes people listen. So do you agree with him? Do you think the middle class is being wiped out?
I think he's oversimplifying a little bit. It's a good talking point for a politician and aspiring presidential candidate here. The middle class has certainly been hurt. I mean, inflation has walloped the American middle class. But if we look back to just a few years ago, the middle class was actually doing fairly well. In 2018, 2019, we saw that wages were increasing. Unemployment was low. We were still continuing to see low inflation. The middle class was actually doing pretty well. So we don't have to look that far back into the rearview mirror to see a time when the middle class can flourish in this country.
So you don't think it's being wiped out, but if we continue on the same track that we're going, will it be eventually?
Well, I mean, if you look at certain states here, absolutely, they've had a real loss of a middle class in states like California because of their tax and regulatory environment. You have to be extraordinarily wealthy or extremely poor to live in California these days. That's really hurt the middle class. But in much of America where we don't have these extreme left-wing policies, the middle class is doing much, much better. So I think there's a lesson to be learned there for politicians. If we keep taxing, if we keep spending, if we keep regulating as we've done over the past 2 years, then yes, that's going to take a toll on the middle class. It's going to continue to raise inflation and make it really, really difficult to live the American dream.
Yeah, I mean, when you hear that $100,000 keeps you in the middle class, $100,000 5-10 years ago, you know, you would have been just fine with a family of 4 or 5 supporting them. So what's it going to take to bring the middle class back really strong, like what it was before the pandemic? And do you think the Biden administration, do you think it'll be strong under them and their policies?
Well, I'll say this. I think the one silver lining of the pandemic, the very dark cloud of the pandemic, was the fact that it's increased remote work. So a lot more people than ever can live where they want to live, so they can escape these high tax climates if they want. They can move from California to Idaho or Arizona or Florida or wherever. And we've seen huge growth in those states because they have a stronger middle class and just a better standard of living by many indexes. So I think there is some hope on that front. But no, I don't see a lot from this administration. You look at the last budget they just introduced a couple months ago, and it's more taxes, it's more spending, it's more of the failed policies that have hurt all of this country, but I think in particular the middle class.
Yeah, and when you talk about working remotely, the family unit, you know, that's a very strong talking point for the middle class. It allows people to stay home with their kids more. So they're getting, you know, more time with their families, which is important too, especially these days. So when people are falling out of the middle class, are they going more to the lower class, or more people from the middle class going to the upper class? How is this balancing out?
Yeah, it's a great question. If you look back to data from 1971, the majority of people who have left the middle class have actually gone to the upper class, which is great news. Of course, we've had too many people shift into the lower class, into the lower quintiles of income. So, yeah, that is a persistent problem. I don't think that we need this micro-targeting. I don't think we need to micromanage the economy the way that certain folks on the left want to do, taxing the rich, handing that money to the poor. I think we need a better environment here, and we need a better climate for people to succeed in this country. And like I said, it wasn't that long ago, just a couple years ago, where we had started to make serious inroads there. I think the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was a huge benefit to the middle class. It cut their tax rates, it simplified their taxes, and we saw a big boom in terms of their income while we maintained inflation at a very, very low rate.
Yeah, and I mean, the American dream really lies on the middle class, and that's worrisome for a lot of people, especially people who are coming to our country legally, and they want to be a part of this country. And then when you see the middle class just kind of dwindling, it's scary. So would you say that inflation is the number one thing that's hurting the middle class right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Inflation, it's taking a bite out of our family budgets, food, gasoline, you name it, it's more expensive. The housing market, you talk about the American dream, the housing market, I think, is a real problem right now. We're starting to see some additional fluctuation there, but with housing prices just going through the roof during the pandemic and shortly thereafter, it made it so hard for people to live that American dream, to buy a home. And now, even if prices have started to stabilize somewhat or even fall in certain areas, we're seeing interest rates that are so high. So that makes the cost of borrowing much higher. We need to get inflation under control. We need to get housing inflation under control so people can afford to buy a house, to keep a roof over their head. But the Fed's actions with regard to interest rates are starting to take their toll on middle-class America more and more. And I think they really need to hit the brakes in terms of additional interest rate hikes, because that's just going to make it more and more expensive to purchase a home, purchase a car, make any kind of large ticket item purchase.
You're absolutely right. Okay, Brandon Arnold, thank you so much for your time this morning. Have a good day.
Thank you.
You're welcome.